Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. If you can hear me okay, if you could please indicate that in the chat box by just saying yes or okay, that would be very helpful. Fantastic. Thank you.
I think she has her mic on mute. Can you guys hear me now? Kate, I think you joined kind of right as she was talking, and then I think she muted her microphone. Kate, I typed that just in case you couldn't hear me, so you'd know that we were trying. Okay, when Kristen comes back on, she might have some options, Kate, for you. Look around. Do you know if the sound on your computer is working? Like sometimes, I have it muted if I am doing other things. And here will work.
Everyone, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to get one of my other moderators squared away so that she can get online, and we were having a few technical difficulties. But for the sake of time, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, everyone should be able to hear me. If you can't hear me, please let me know. Okay. Well, my name is Kristen Davis, and I have the wonderful pleasure of working with the Mecklenburg County Cooperative Extension as an extension agent. And I teach people about local foods as well as a number of other things. I'm also focused in food safety and also farmers market outreach. And today for our session, our other two moderators will be Anna Brown, who's with the Char-Meck Food Policy Council, and also Beth Mack, who has done a number of research projects or done considerable research on farm to school in Charlotte, North Carolina. So as we get started, a couple things that I want to cover with you with just kind of navigating Blackboard Collaborate. If you'll take a look at the screen, the whiteboard pane is the area in which you will be able to see the actual presentation. Most of you all as participants, we will navigate and we will advance the slides for you so you don't have to do that. Also, you have your audio pane, which is where you will see pictures of your moderators if there are pictures loaded. But also directly under, you'll see here there's a talk button. I ask that participants that you not use that option. We're trying to only have the mic of the current moderator that's speaking active at the time. And the video option, we won't use that today because most of us aren't using the video option. In our participator or the participant pane, you'll see there's some options right below. The first option gives you the option for smileys, and then there's also the raise your hand option. You won't really need that, but the one that we will use today is the very last one. That is the polling option. So I will direct you to that option when needed. In the box below, you'll see all of the participants that are on the session, and then the main option that you'll use today is the chat pane. If you have questions or you have trouble hearing your moderators, you can place your information or your questions in the chat box below. Okay, so if all of that is clear, if you all could please click here at the very first option and give me a smiley face. Fantastic. So let's start off with just getting a general idea of where we all are in regards to local food and food policy in Mecklenburg County. So if you could, in your option, your very last option in the participant pane, you'll see an A. It gives you a drop-down box. If you could please rate your knowledge of local food and food policy in Mecklenburg County. A would be no knowledge, B would be little knowledge, C would mean that you're familiar with food policy and local food, and then D would be that you're very knowledgeable. Typically, these are people who are advocates or are already involved in the food policy organizations throughout the county. Okay, so great. So it looks as though some of you all have little knowledge, and then a few of you all are familiar or very knowledgeable about food policy within Mecklenburg County. Okay, great. That's wonderful, because in this session what we want to do is we want to give you a really broad overview of food policy and also local foods in Mecklenburg County. So our agenda for today, we're going to kind of go over an overview of the food movement in Mecklenburg County. Then we're going to hear from the Char-Meck Food Policy Council about some of the work that they've done. And then Beth Mack will share with us some highlights from the Charlotte Farm to School report. And then we'll end with some questions from you all, and also share some resources with you. So let's go ahead and get started. As mentioned, my name is Kristen Davison. I'm going to try to provide a very broad overview of what is going on with food policy and also mainly local foods within Mecklenburg County. So first, what I've found is that most of you all probably know this information, but I've learned as I travel around the county and I educate people on the food system, I've learned not to assume that everyone understands what the food system is or what the food system entails. So the food system is all processes including growing, harvesting, processing, transporting, marketing, and consuming of food and food that feeds us. So that's kind of a broad overview of what the food system is. And when we look at the food system, what we know is that there are two most common food systems. We have our industrial food system, and then we also have our local food system, which we're going to talk about a bit later. So with our industrial food system, some of the key portions of understanding this system is that food is typically produced in large quantities. So in most cases, your industrial food system includes monocropping, which means that there's predominantly one crop that is produced on a farm. Also, food is typically transported in this system via air, truck, or shipped to your wholesalers. And then when the food arrives at wholesalers, those wholesalers will then take the food and distribute it in large quantities to food stores and grocers in your area. And then at the end of that system, that food typically arrives to your table, and depending on the consumer, the food is either discarded in a way that is not sustainable or is not in the best interest of the economy. But what we know is that from this system, a lot of the food does end up in landfills. Now, when we look at the local food system, this food system, which starts here with the growing process, but is more of a cyclical system. So what we know is that many of the components of the industrial food system are similar to the local food system. However, that process occurs on a much smaller scale. What we know is that in the local food system, it does involve more small-scale farmers, and those small-scale farmers are charged with maximizing their resources. They have an interest in reducing waste in any way that they can, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the key components of this system is that small-scale growers will produce a variety of crops. So in your local food system, we don't see very many of what we call monocropping. And then when we look at the harvesting process, much of the harvesting is done by hand because most small-scale farmers do not have access or have the funds to purchase large farm machinery. That food is typically transported via a truck or a van to your local farmers markets, your local restaurants, or stores, specialty stores that carry a local food or specialty produce. And then one of the most important portions of this food system is that a lot of the food, the scraps and the waste, are then composted, so farmers are able to use that to build fertile soil to continue to grow food that arrives at all of our tables. So when we look at kind of the big picture, one of the points that I wanted to raise, I had the privilege of being a part of the Fresh Expo and some of the planning around that event for this year. And Healthy Connections Corporation conducted about 3 years of intensive research, including surveys to Charlotteans. And what they found from that research is that about 79% of the surveyors in Charlotte are health conscious and try to support natural, organic, and a healthy lifestyle as much as possible. In fact, as a result of their research, they decided to have the first inaugural Fresh Expo here in Charlotte versus many other locations because there was such a growing interest in organic and healthy, wholesome food in Charlotte, North Carolina. So back in last month, actually, they hosted the first Fresh Expo that supported local, organic, wholesome, and non-GMO foods in Charlotte, North Carolina. What we also know when we look at Mecklenburg County is that we have about 11 family farms in Mecklenburg. Now, keep in mind, when we use the term farm, that doesn't necessarily mean that these are farms that are producing food in high quantity to go back into our food system or into our market. Many of these farms are now agritourism farms. For instance, they host hay rides and they may have some U-pick options or pumpkin patches and things like that so that they can stay afloat because many of the farmers in our area are indeed, in some cases, have been struggling in the past and just trying to maintain and sustain their farm. We also have about 26 farmers markets in Mecklenburg. 8 of those have developed within the past 3 years, and that is as a result of the growing interest in local foods and also in regards to a lot of interest in people becoming educated and wanting to know what's in their food. Okay, so Heidi how many were surveyed by the Fresh Expo resulted in the 79% response. Heidi, actually, I don't have that information. I'm not sure exactly how many people were were surveyed, but I can definitely try to find out that information and get it to you. And also, everyone, I didn't note that if you all could, if you type your questions into the chat box, some of those we may answer during the actual presentation, but many of them we will answer at the end of the presentation, just so that we can keep to our time. But that's a wonderful question, Heidi, and I'll definitely find out the answer for you. We also have about 26 plus community gardens in Mecklenburg. We see that in our office we manage a lot of the park and rec community gardens, and we see that there's an increased and growing interest in community gardens in Mecklenburg County. We also know that restaurants are beginning to source more local food. We have the privilege of having Harvest Moon Grill in our area, which is nearly 100% local. I think if it wasn't for actual condiments and things of that sort, they would be 100% local. There is also an increase in local food and value-added businesses. And when we use the term value-added, what we mean is that there are businesses that are developing that are taking produce and foods that are produced locally and turning that into a business. We use examples like Viva Raw, which is a local company that produces raw juice, and much of the produce that they use for their juices come from local farmers. There's also a growing interest in urban agriculture projects and an increased interest in small-scale farming. We're seeing more young people becoming interested in becoming farmers. And, of course, we can't leave out the fact that there are more CSAs available based on consumer demand. Many farms are growing produce specifically for CSAs, which are based upon the demand from consumers. So when we place all of that in context, what we know is that local food in our area in Mecklenburg County is regional food. Why? Because we don't have enough farms within Mecklenburg County itself to produce all of the food or to meet the demand for local food in our area. So what we typically say is that we are dependent upon the necklace counties, of which you can see the dots here, the necklace counties around Mecklenburg County, because they have the rural land to produce food. We're dependent upon them. Much of the food that you see at your local farmers markets come from those areas, come from the counties that you see listed here on the slide. So Gaston, Lincoln, Cabarrus, Union, Iredell County, they are producing a lot of our food. Now, if you have the privilege of being a part of a community garden or you grow your own food, then of course you have the most local food possible. However, if that's not the case and you're shopping at farmers markets or even some supermarkets, your local food is regional. So the broader context of all of this information and kind of the take-home message that I want you to get from this portion of the presentation is that the food system is interconnected. When we look at our food system, there are many components. We look at farming. We know there's a growing interest in green initiatives throughout the county and education being provided by master gardeners. We have our Ag in the Classroom initiatives. We have our 4-H program with Ag curriculum, and also composting programs and community gardens and much more. From an economic standpoint, we have the NC 10% campaign, which charges consumers to commit 10% of their total food dollars to purchasing locally. But one of the larger interests that we see is that there's this real growing interest in farmers markets and shopping at farmers markets. Also, the food system, or especially our local food system, is social. It reconnects us back to our food in a very humane way, and it helps to really build community. And then the food system, local food system, is environmentally sound. Local food lends to preservation and stewardship of our land. But one of the larger issues, the larger points that I want to make today is that we cannot forget that also the food system is political. There are political components to our food system that cause all of us to a level of advocacy. and Anna is going to share a little bit more about that later in the presentation. So here are some of the take-home messages today, and I love this picture that I actually snapped at the Healthy Home Market that gives a really good broad view of why supporting the local food system is so important. But our local food system, a healthy local food system, is economically viable for our economy. We know from our research with the NC 10% campaign that we spend about $35 billion on food in North Carolina. If we could commit 10% of our dollars to sourcing local food, that's $3.5 billion back into our actual economy. Local food is also healthy for our families. We know that when you reduce the travel time of food and then you harvest food at the peak of ripeness, we also know that that food is more healthy. It has more nutrient value for our families. As I mentioned, local food is environmentally sound in most cases, but local food is political and calls us to advocacy. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Anna Brown from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Food Policy Council to talk to us about some of the work that they have been doing here in Mecklenburg County. Anna?
Okay. Can you hear me? I think everybody, if you can't, put a note in the chat box and we'll stop. But yes, thanks, Kristen. That was great. And I loved the pictorial view of the food system. I think that's really helpful to put it all into perspective. I do work with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Food Policy Council, and so I just want to talk a little bit today about what we're doing and how you can potentially be involved. So the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Food Policy Council is a nonprofit. We're a 501c3, and that's a little bit different because sometimes food policy councils will fall under government agencies and sometimes they'll fall under universities, but we are actually a nonprofit. We exist to advocate for policies that build a sustainable, equitable, and healthy food system. So what's important about that is our focus really is policy work versus project-specific work. We do have a board of directors that we are governed by and being a nonprofit. For a little bit of history, back in 2010, there was a community food assessment, and it was conducted by researchers from UNCC for the Food Policy Council and also for the Health Department. And it looked at Mecklenburg County in terms of census block groups. There are 373 census block groups in Mecklenburg County, and of those, 60 were found to be in food deserts. And they defined a food desert as an area, that census block group, without a full-service food store. And the full-service food store would be providing fresh vegetables, meats, dairy, that type of thing. In addition to that, they found that the people in these food deserts were having a higher rate of premature death from heart disease. So we have a huge health impact there, which is also an economic impact. And if you look at the map to the right, it's a little bit small, but you'll get the general idea. The blue areas were food deserts. And so that gives us a little bit of idea of where we have some access issues. And that was, again, conducted back in 2010. I want to talk a bit about kind of where we are now. In 2012, the Food Policy Council put together an experts panel. And this is 24 individuals from across the food system. They represent agriculture, restaurants, direct service, community leaders, academia, farmers markets, health, government, extension. And they're there to provide us with input because they're on the ground working and they can tell us what's happening in their area, what barriers are they facing, what are they seeing as part of their piece of the food system. But as you can imagine, 24 people is a lot, and figuring out where we want to go and getting direction from that large group, is a challenge. So we created a core team that's made up of individuals from the experts panel and also myself. And what we did with the core team is we took input from many sources. So we looked at all the information that our experts panel was giving us. We looked at the multiple, regional initiatives that are happening. We took information from our open meetings, which are public forum open meetings where individuals can come and tell us what's going on in their area and what they're running up against. And we came up with 3 focus areas as just a starting point, and it's certainly just a starting point, but we wanted to kind of focus in and figure out where we wanted to go next. One of those areas is about building relationships with our planning and development staff from the city and county. And we want to build upon that community food assessment that I mentioned earlier to understand how planning and development impacts food access. I've met recently with some planners, and throughout their education, they're learning about transportation, the water, all of these different systems, but really the food system is not one that has been talked about in the past. And so it's becoming more important now, but we really want to help build that relationship and help them by providing information, by sharing best practices from other cities and across the nation, and helping them understand that when they're planning and working on projects that it's impacting our food system, and so that they can understand that a little bit more. I'm just sorry, I'm seeing Marilyn's question. Also, the census block group must be low income. I would think the census block groups are just defined as the whole, but we can talk about that in the question and answers. Okay, and so one of our other initiatives, one of our other focus areas is related to the Connect Our Future grant. This is an $8 million planning and sustainability grant that covers 14 counties that you can see in this map. Mecklenburg is in the center of this, and we have the ring counties and even some additional counties, and this dips into South Carolina. This grant, a big chunk of it is a HUD grant, and so again, typically looking at transportation, water, air, jobs, etc. And for the first time, thanks to some work from some individuals that may be on the call today, food was included as a separate section. And this is a really big deal because it hasn't happened in the past, and again, it's all about getting this food system idea, this reality, understanding to the people that are making the decisions about our future and planning. So we have a liaison to this committee, and that's Kristen Davison, who spoke earlier, and she will be representing Mecklenburg County in this whole initiative. We will also, through that initiative, they'll be developing food policy councils in all the 14 counties, and a regional food policy council will emerge. And what's exciting about that is just, again, it's connecting, because as Kristen mentioned earlier, we're this kind of urban center, but we're being fed by the counties surrounding us. And so looking at it as a regional perspective is really valuable, because as we work together, we're able to be the market to the farmers that we have surrounding us, and we're able to be fed by these farmers that are close by. So it's really exciting to be taking this bigger regional approach to this. And the one that most of you are here about today, this focus area, is about identifying and addressing policy barriers related to children's access to local food. We want to understand the policies that are affecting children's access to local food, and we really mean all children. So this is the public schools, private schools, daycare, really understanding what's happening with our children. We want to identify any barriers and understand what's happening, and can we get local food into schools and other areas where our children are eating. To this end, we're partnering with lots of different organizations. Charlotte School of Law is one. We're partnering with the schools, with local initiatives, because again, we have many local initiatives that are currently going on, as well as the PTA organizations, and we're certainly grateful for their help, and the youth, because with the last two, the PTA and the youth, I really feel like those are our stakeholders. They're the people that are really engaged and invested in this. And we want to make sure that we're hearing what they have to say, that we're partnering with them, and that they're involved in this process of this transformation. And so what can you do? What we want you to do is to join us in this effort. And I'm sharing here the email of myself, Anna Brown, but also Kendall Kendrick. She is the person working with the Food Policy Council that's heading up this particular focus area. And so she's already connecting with different projects going on and different initiatives to link those together. So we want to help connect you with the other things that are happening across the region. We want to share best practices from our region and across the nation. And when you run into policy barriers, you can come to us and we'll help you address those barriers. And I'll talk about that for just a minute. So as I mentioned in the beginning, we're really not project focused. We're not taking on any individual projects. But what we want to do is serve as a resource for all the amazing projects that are going on now. Because if you have a project that's working, it's plugging along, you're creating this great model, you're working in your school to do something, and then you hit a policy barrier, that can feel very overwhelming. Where do I start? Who do I need to call? What are my options? And instead of getting stuck and maybe the project crumbling or having a big break, you can call on the Food Policy Council and say, we need help. We've run into this regulation, be it zoning, health, whatever the case might be. Can you help us figure out what's going on? And then we can use our connections and resources to really dig into that a little bit more, to understand, is there a workaround? Are we understanding the regulation or the zoning issue properly? Or is it something that we actually do need to change and we need to talk to city council, zoning, whoever the case might be? So that's the role that we want to play in helping these projects be successful so that we can roll them out across our region. And so, because I believe that together, we really can improve our children's access to fresh local food. But I really think it's about us working together to understanding what's going on. I've talked to individuals that are working on some amazing projects, and they really don't know that a similar project's happening just on the other side of town. And so as we pool those resources and our experience, I think it gives us strength to really move forward and make a huge impact on the children in our area. And I'm excited that Beth Mack will be speaking just after me to help us understand some of those specific pieces. So that's all that I have. Kristen, I guess I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Anna. That's great information. I can tell you that from my work with the Char-Meck Food Policy Council, I'm very pleased to be a part of the council and to see a lot of the work, the background work that's been done, and even a lot of the planning that's being done really come to fruition. I think we're making a lot of headway. We are still waiting for one of our moderators to arrive. She had some issues signing in, so she's scurrying over to my office so that she can sign on. So while we're waiting for her, she should be arriving in about, oh, fantastic, so she's on. Okay, well, Beth, I will turn it over to you. And everyone welcome Beth Mack. She's done a lot of research on the Farm to School report.
Thanks, Kristen. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Sorry about that. I had some technical difficulties this morning getting everything set up. But I want to thank you all for having me, and thanks for joining in on the session. And hopefully we can get some things and some movement started. As Kristen mentioned, I spent about 6 months researching farm-to-school initiatives within Mecklenburg County, and particularly CharlotteMecklenburg school systems. So while this is specific to CMS, a lot of the stuff is very general. You're going to run into it across the other schools in North Carolina if you're at public school. So kind of getting started here, a lot of people have come to me and they're like, well, what is farm to school? A lot of people just think that it's local foods into the cafeteria. But upon further research, it's more than that. That is one component of it, and this is a model I came up with just because I like to visualize things. As you can see at the the bottom bubble is schools, and we do have the school gardens, curriculum, local foods in the cafeteria, and we're going to talk about that in just more in depth in a minute. And then we have the community. You want to educate and engage the community members to really get this to be a community-wide effort, so it's just not alone in the schools. And the other portion is, of course, local producers and distributors. And I think one of the bigger ones is promotion and marketing, because a lot of these times we have all these great programs in the schools, but our community doesn't really know about them. So we really need to get that momentum and grassroots movement behind it. Going on, a lot of people are asking about why farm to school. It's kind of a synergistic effect. It's one of the very few places where you have environmental, economic, and health and nutrition coincide, so you can really have a vast array of stakeholders in this movement here. We have healthy youth. Obviously, they're one of the main benefactors of farm to school and local foods, and gardening as well helps with the nutrition, physical activity, those sorts of things, and also it has enhanced learning as well. healthy economy, as Kristen and Anna have mentioned, keeping that local money within our local economy here. And then healthy communities. This goes along with the healthy youth, the healthy economy, and just keeping the money here, potentially reducing the childhood obesity epidemic, and then being more aware of the environmental impacts of purchasing local foods. Let's go on to the next slide. So giving just a brief overview of Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. It is the second largest public school district in North Carolina. The only one that is bigger is Wake County Public Schools. And overall, we're in the top 20 largest school districts in the nation. So we have a huge amount of students that we're dealing with and that we're feeding every day. Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools is a public school district. They do participate in the National School Breakfast and Lunch Program, and we'll see how that plays into some of the regulations about getting local foods into cafeterias. They serve approximately 97,000 lunches daily, so that's quite a bit. And then every school serves the exact same meal every day. Of course, you do have some modifications between your K-5, K-8 schools and your high schools there. There's a lot of considerations about getting local foods into your local cafeterias. I could easily spend an hour just on the considerations alone, but for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of run through them very briefly. One of the bigger ones is cost. There's been some issues of local foods costing more than you can get from your big food distributors such as U.S. Foods or Cisco, anything like that. There is another cost to farmers, food preparation, because a lot of times when you're getting in these fresh produce, it's not processed, so they need to process that with their, say, for example, sweet potatoes. They're going to need to wash them, they're going to need to peel them, they're going to need to chop them up and boil them or bake them, whatever their plans are for that. That requires more labor, so time there. And then if they actually have the equipment and storage room for that. And then some of the educational activities that we're going to be talking about, such as going out to farms or farmers markets, those do require funding. The other one is procurement, which is a very complicated topic dealing with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools. Because they accept federal money, I'll give you a brief analysis of that. I think it's on the next slide. Another one is lack of awareness. I put this green arrows there just to show you this is where some of the what can you do that I'm going to get to at the end of my presentation here. This is what we're going to key in on. Lack of awareness is on part of farmers, the schools, but also the community as well. And we'll talk about how we can increase that awareness and really create a demand for local foods in the school systems. Another consideration is culinary training of staff. Usually they don't have very much training. Seasonality of local foods is another issue. Obviously, you get most of your abundant harvest, especially foods that youth are more familiar with. So you'll have your strawberries, your tomatoes and stuff, your peppers. Those are all in the summer, but schools, unfortunately, are, for the most part, not in session during these peak harvest times. Another one is youth unwillingness to try unfamiliar foods. This one might seem a little bit odd of why parents can help and why that might be an issue, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And the last one is management of school gardens is a huge one where parents can get involved in. So a lot of people ask, what's the deal with sourcing local produce in cafeterias? One of the bigger ones, since CMS is a public school system and they accept federal money for their school lunch and school breakfast program, and this applies to any school district that accepts federal money from the government for their school lunch and school breakfast program, fresh produce that is sold directly to schools from a farm has to be GAP or GHP certified. And what that stands for is good agricultural practices and good handling practices. And what this is it's just basically a food safety and sanitation, and it's recommended by the USDA, but this is a state-level policy that is mandated by the NC Department of Public Instruction Child Nutrition Services Division. So this is something that we run into a lot, and this is what brings in the cost to the farmers, because for a farmer to be to receive this certification, it costs easily $400 yearly, but with the potential of costing a lot more than that. So that is something I know the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Food Policy Council, we are keying in on and seeing how we can get around this, because other places such as Denver, Colorado, they have managed to get around this. So that's something to consider if you're interested in this. And another popular question is, what's the deal with consuming items from the garden? Well, to start off with, since we just kind of went over the GAP GHC certification for your fresh produce, you cannot use the stuff that you grow in a garden in the cafeteria at this point. If it is properly washed, what you can do with the produce from the garden is you can taste it in the classroom or out in the garden. The children can take it home. It can be sold to the public. I know there's a school up in Davidson, I think it's a magnet school, but what they do is they take the produce from the garden and they sell it in the carpool line, and then they take that money to help kind of with their gardening. I know they wanted to get some rainwater barrels, so they can use that and to help fund that project. Or if they wanted to go take a field trip to one of the local farms, they can use that money to go fund that field trip. And the last one, it can be used for, it can be donated to the local hunger relief organizations. Some of the schools in the county have partnered up with Friendship Trays and Friendship Gardens. So what they do is they'll come in and they'll donate the produce there, and they deliver meals to a lot of the homebound in the county. So what about other local products? For your meat, poultry, and seafood, CMS does not utilize the raw forms just for food safety reasons. So that cuts down the potential for that. You could potentially get that processed some places, but as with the grains and dairies, but they have to meet the prices offered by large food distributors such as U.S. Foods, Cisco, all of those groups, which can be a challenge. So where do parents fit in? And going back to kind of the farm-to-school logic model, if you will, I kind of highlighted where parents can focus in and really develop our efforts. I know there's a lot of regulatory issues with local foods at a more broader scale at the CMS. So what I'm really going to be talking to this morning is more of a grassroots movement to really create the demand. So what can parents do? Advocate. I know through a lot of my classes, I came across, advocacy, that's just like writing a letter to a senator or such and such. But in all actuality, it's a lot more than that. There's all different forms of advocacy, and so what I'm gonna talk about is the little A. The little A is all the little measures that we're going to be doing, or I'm going to be suggesting. I'm sorry, we're having a little bit of difficulties with the slides. All right, well, for some reason my slides cut off, but I'm just going to go ahead and kind of talk about some of these points, and we can get that fixed later on and make sure we can get them out to you. So some of the ways that you can advocate as a parent and doing more of the grassroots movement is to first educate yourself on what are the issues and what we can do. The second one is practice what you preach. If you have children at home, or perhaps you work with children, or you're just a school volunteer, make sure you start at your home. So if you're passionate with local foods and stuff, get knowledgeable about the issue and go out and practice yourself. Go to the farmers markets. You can really see where the farmers are coming from and what the issues really are and what it's like to really form those relationships. The next one would be, again, if you are a parent or you work with kids, is to introduce your kids to fruits and vegetables at home, at church, school, or the preschool. Going back to one of the considerations of farm to school was youth unwillingness to try new foods. I know when I grew up, I did not like Brussels sprouts, and I still kind of don't like them, but that's because I was really never exposed to them. So the more you expose your children to them, the more likely they're going to be able to eat them. And that's one of the core principles of the Farm to School success is we need the children's support along with the parents and community, but we really need their buy-in and their excitement to be able to try all these different things that they may not be used to. Some of them may not be used to kale, which in the winter you're going to find abundance of. And if we're going to be serving local foods in schools, we'll be having that one in school lunches. So another way that you can advocate is to start or assist with school gardens. I've sat in on numerous sessions just kind of talking about what are the issues with school gardens. A lot of the times they need help starting them, so whether that be just looking for grants, applying for grants if you are knowledgeable in that process. Summer maintenance is another key issue, just because a lot of the time schools let out for the summer and you can't really let your garden beds grow over. And one of the other benefits of school gardens is that it really gets kids out there in nature in the community, and it increases their physical activity. And there's been several studies showing that if they garden, they're going to be more likely to actually taste and eat what they're growing as opposed to if they did not. Another one to advocate is to organize a local student group or club. There's actually a couple of these within the county here. One of the better ones that I know of is Youth Empowered Solutions. What they have is a youth engagement. They have a team of Real Food Active Living, and then what it does is they have 5 youth employed that are, I believe, all in CMS schools. But what they do is they go out and they get other youth within the county excited about some of the local food initiatives and active living, physical activity. So it really kind of generates a great grassroots movement and getting that excited to create the demand on their end, because I know a lot of the times youth, especially our teenagers, they don't really like to be told what to do. But if you involve them, it really gives them a sense of empowerment and ownership of the program that we can really just see behind and get a lot of momentum on that. Another way you could advocate is to organize an event. So whether that be field trips to farmers markets or farms, pick your own farm, you can do taste testings, because the more you taste a fruit or vegetable, the more likely you're going to eat it. And there's been research out there showing that it takes about 10 to 12 times for a child or even adults to decide if they really like a fruit or vegetable. Another idea, you could do a local food cook-off, and on my next slide originally, I'll have some information about one organization that does this. And then you can also bring in local farmers to kind of get them excited, show them where their food's coming from, that apples don't come from Harris Teeter. They actually grow on a tree, and carrots come from the ground. Again, you don't find them at Harris Teeter. That's not where they grow. And another one is, the last one is getting involved in community groups. Obviously, we have the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Food Policy Council, getting involved with your PTAs to really get a movement going. If there's not a farm to school or health aspect of your parent-teacher association, what you can do is go ahead and start those. One example that I wanted to mention about the event, and I'm sorry you can't see the slide, but because I have a nice little logo, is an event called Lunch In, and it's created by a group called Advocates for Health in Action up in Raleigh, North Carolina. And what the event does is it engages parents, community members, and students to raise awareness and advocate for fresh and healthy school lunches. So what that is, it has 2 local chefs come into the school. And this is after hours at school. They come in, they battle it out. They'll get a seasonal, fresh produce item. It's kind of like your top chef. So it's a mystery item. They come in, they reveal the item, and the chefs will cook for about an hour or so. And then during that time, there's educational events. Usually this is in a cafeteria gymnasium, so lots of space. So they can sample healthy foods in the meantime. They can gather healthy meal and snack ideas, enjoy games and arts related to the local foods, learn more about the school lunch program, and then learn about gardening as well. And at the end of the hour, the dishes are judged by students. So you have a little panel, and you can just kind of put in the votes of which one tasted better. And the winning chef receives the Iron Carrot Award. So that's a cute little event, and if you want more information about that, once we get the slides fixed and emailed out, I can provide you with the website. And also, one of my slides is missing. There's a resource page, and that one has a lot of great ideas other than mine that I kind of briefly went through, more specific examples. What it really comes down to is we need to create a demand, and right now there is some through some of the organizations, but we really need to create a larger demand, and parents play a key portion in that to get their youth on board or their students or their children on board, and then just the rest of the community as well. So we'll be taking questions, and I appreciate your time, and thanks for bearing with me through my technical difficulties, and I'm going to turn it back over to Kristen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. One of the reasons why I was out of commission for a minute is I was trying to load the slides so that you all would have an opportunity to see those, to see the slides. But we will download the slides to a PDF, and if you're on the session today, I've taken a note of all of your names. I'm assuming that everyone pre-registered. If you pre-registered, then I do have your email address. If you did not pre-register and you joined the call, I'll need you to place your email address in the chat box, or I'll need you to email me directly to my email so that I can get you the information from the session today. And my email is there. Just place it in the chat box. So we'll entertain questions now. Even though the session ends at 12, but we have extended the time in the chat space. So if you have questions, we'll entertain those now. Okay, I'm assuming that we have no questions. Again, we apologize for the technical difficulties. The strangest things happen on webinars. We actually loaded the slides and everything was working earlier, and I guess there's some type of a glitch in the computer. I see a few chat boxes. Okay, okay, absolutely. Yes, one of the main upcoming events that I want to share with you all, give me just a second and I'll load it to the white space, is a listening session that is being held at the Charlotte School of Law next week, actually. And if you'll stand by, you'll see the information appear in just a moment. Okay, so there we are, and keep in mind that when I scroll, it doesn't scroll for you, so you'll need to scroll down to see the information on the whiteboard. But on November the 15th from 4 to 7, the NC Sustainable Local Food Advisory Council, in partnership with the Char-Meck Food Policy Council, will be hosting a listening session, and the intention of this listening session is to hear from consumers and businesses and everyone who has an interest in growing the food economy and also interest in learning about food policy, to get feedback from you all. So again, that session, you see the information there. Registration is required. If you click on the link there, it will take you to the option to register. I will also post the link there. I've also posted the link in the chat box, so you can click there and register. The session is free, but the thing that's most important about this session and why it's so important to have parents and also child advocates at this meeting is that there will be many key stakeholders and many key players from the state level, which is where a lot of the policy issues around children's access to food is. A lot of those individuals will be present at this listening session. They're going to be there to hear concerns from parents and to hear concerns from advocates around children's access to food. So we encourage you to show up in great numbers and share this information with your friends and family as well, and encourage them to come to the session so that their concerns can be heard. Anna, do you have any upcoming events to share?
I don't have any. I appreciate everything you said about the listening session, because again, I think it's as important as Kristen said, and I would ask that you take it and spread it to any mailing list that you have and back to your schools or your organizations, because it is a really unique opportunity for us to be heard by the people at the state level, to understand what they are doing, and they want to know what they can do for us. And this is a great opportunity. There is also going to be, and I don't know if I can find it quickly, but if the Connect Our Future grant is doing public hearings around the 14 counties, and those are starting, I believe, next week in Union County. And it would be something that would be great if we can head out to these meetings, talk about food at these meetings so that it's being documented how important food is to our local economy, because that's kind of the baseline. They're going to be seeing what people are interested in to sustain our area and to deal with the growth that's coming our way. And those events are listed on the Connect Our Future Facebook page. But Kristen, do you know how to get to that? Or?
I just listed it in the chat box.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And so that's just another opportunity to talk about food and to make sure that we're being heard for these larger grants and planning issues.
Thank you, Anna. And Kate, to your question, what's the best way to hear about these kinds of things following the council on Facebook and newsletter? Absolutely. You can follow the council on Facebook as well as Cooperative Extension. We also have a Facebook page. The slides, which are not showing, had all of our contact information there as well, but I'll list our contact information on the whiteboard for you all if you'll stand by just a moment. But yes, and absolutely, we also send out emails for Extension on my end. I send out a monthly newsletter that has a lot of information, and the Food Policy Council also sends out emails as well.
Yes, so you can send me your information if you'd like to be on our mailing list as well, but you can follow the Facebook page, but we do send out periodic notifications when we have upcoming meetings or events where we'd like people to get involved. We would love that.
Okay. Everyone give me just a second, and I'll make sure that I list our contact information so you have that.
Okay, and Penny's asked a question. Beth, what do you think about that?
I'm sorry.
It looks like Penny has we have two questions. Penny has a question about getting involved in the CMS menu planning.
Getting involved with the menu planning is pretty hard to do because all of the USDA requirements are there. So that one's a little bit more hands-off to parents. What you can do, though, for eliminating desserts is at each school, they have a la carte items. So what you can do is work with your school to develop a school wellness policy to eliminate those. You could do that one, but then menu planning, you can't quite get into as much unless you're at a private school.
And then did you see this question about, the Department of Defense?
Yeah. Did I encounter any info about Department of Defense? Yes, they are still operating their program. However, it's mostly rolled into the North Carolina Department of Ag. They have a farm to school program. However, that's mostly just of the local foods. And one of the reasons why CMS cannot really feasibly use that program is because that program, they deliver to one drop-off site for each school district. Well, there's 160 schools within the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system, and they don't have enough room to store those fresh produce items at their centralized warehouse. They actually don't have refrigerator storage. And then there would be an added cost of distributing those fresh produce items directly to each school. So at this point, it's not really feasible until something else kind of comes along.
Aaron, I wanted to address your question. I know I recently heard about the salad bar grant, and I know that Kendall, who is working with us, is looking at that for the Chantilly Montessori, which is a CMS magnet. But there are salad bar grants out there, and I think it's probably an important piece for us to start connecting. And I think that's kind of what I was talking about with, let's all get together about this. Let's get these parents and the kids that are, excited about these opportunities together so that we're realizing, okay, a grant's coming up. How can we connect with this? This other school has done this already.
And in addition to those salad bars, I've spoke with CMS. A lot of what the concern is the food safety aspects. They would, and this was regulated by the health department as well as some of their environmental health services, is that all of the salad bars, they wouldn't be able to have the ice kind. They would need to be the plug-in refrigerated kind. You would need your sneeze guards, and they need someone to supervise the salad bar line at all times. So there's an additional price in that, and they value a system of what's in one school, they want in everyone. That way they don't have a parent at such and such school saying, hey, my kid doesn't have a salad bar, what is that one school? But I think that's something that can be worked around, especially if we just focus on getting them into your high schools. I think it's a great idea. So that's something that is another issue that we could definitely work on.
Okay.
Our health team.
Any additional questions? And we're receiving a lot of feedback from someone's mic. I'm not sure who it is, but if you could mute your mics, that would be very helpful. I am also about to share the actual slides with you all in the session. So you will have copies of those. I think it's probably easier to do it this way than perhaps to email them. Also, after this session, if you would please be so kind as to complete an evaluation that you will receive via email. That would be very helpful for us as we're moving forward to see if there are additional, perhaps additional webinars that we may need to do, or additional information that we didn't include that you'd like to learn about in regards to today's session. Okay, so you should see on your screen is giving you an option to download the slides for your own use. You can download those to your computer. I'm also sharing just a brochure about our programs here in the Family and Consumer Sciences program at Cooperative Extension. Okay. Any other questions for us today before we end the session? Fantastic. So I'd like to thank both of our moderators, Anna Brown and Beth Mack. Thank you so much for sharing such wonderful information with us today. And if we could all give them a round of applause at the very first option in the participant box. If you press the applause, that will signify that we're ready to adjourn. Thank you, everyone. We will be in contact via email with the evaluation, but you have all of our contact information on the screen. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions.